We're all good? You can hear me? Excellent, excellent. Good morning. I'm Lisa Gromlich. I'm president of AGU, and it's an honor to welcome you to today's panel, Women Leading the Wave, Innovators in Ocean Science and Climate Action. So, I'm a paleoclimatologist, and I have spent most of my career studying Earth's climate through tree rings, often found deep in landlocked mountainous regions, quite a different field research site compared to those of you who are involved in ocean sciences. But as we all know, the Earth's system is deeply interconnected. And the fingerprints of climate change that I discovered in tree rings can also be found in the ocean through changes in temperature, its chemistry, and its motions. Today, our discussion focuses on the remarkable women who are expanding our understanding of the ocean and driving climate resilience. These scientists contribute not only to groundbreaking research, but also inspire others through mentorship and collaboration, paving the way for future leaders in ocean science. We'll be exploring what it takes to thrive in this field, including the challenges of field-based research, the impact of mentorship, and the importance of interdisciplinary collaboration. We'll also discuss how we can strengthen support for women in science so the next generation can make even greater waves. So now I'm thrilled to introduce our distinguished panelists. I'll go through them one at a time, and then I'll have a seat and start with the questions. So we have Dr. Clarissa Carthouse, a postdoctoral fellow at Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution. We have Samantha, otherwise known as Sam Medlock, the Assistant Administrator at Office of Resilience Strategy of Federal Emergency Management Agency in the United States. We have Coral Pasisi, Director of Climate Change and Sustainability from the Pacific Community. And we have Elizabeth Connors, a PhD candidate at Scripps Institute of Oceanography. So here we go. Clarissa, you're first. Are you ready? Okay.
Am I ready?
Yes, you're ready.
Okay.
Okay, but I get to ask you a question.
Yeah.
So could you share a specific project or research initiative that you've led that significantly advanced our understanding of ocean climate interactions, and what were some of the key challenges and breakthroughs?
Yeah. So as you know, the ocean is one of the most important carbon sinks on our planet. And one of the ways that the ocean captures and sequesters carbon is by small organisms that grow near the sea surface. And when they die, their biomass sticks together and sinks into deeper water layers. And we call these tiny sinking pieces of organic material marine snow. And so marine snow is a key factor in how much carbon the ocean can take and in how much of that carbon is stored in the ocean long term. And so one of the challenges is to predict where the marine snow goes, if it will be degraded or if it will keep sinking until it reaches the seafloor. And so this is why I study marine snow. And I joined Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution about 2.5 years ago. And I wanted to know how much degradation happens in the marine snow. And I did not have a tool to measure respiration, which is the most important degradation pathway in marine snow. And so I decided I want to build this tool. And I met an engineer who is working with oxygen respiration. So we developed an idea. And one of our biggest challenges was to find funding and also for me to know how funding works in the United States and in Woods Hole. But we wrote a proposal and we got funding. And so we were actually building a small lab robot. And now it sits on my bench back in Woods Hole on the lab. And it has been doing about 30 experiments. And it rotates to keep the marine snow in suspension. And it measures oxygen regularly. And with that, we can understand carbon respiration and carbon flux in the ocean. And we can study it and include this information in future models.
I love that example. And also, it points out the fact that none of us do this alone, that it's always the way in which we collaborate with others in both defining the questions and finding the breakthroughs. So, as a follow up, what strategies do you find effective in supporting and amplifying the voices of women in ocean science and climate action? And how can institutions and the broader scientific community better foster an inclusive and equitable environment?
I think that's a beautiful question. So, and I think it's something that everybody can contribute to. And so I think of it as what are the biggest challenges that prevent accessibility and equality in science? And I think the first challenge is everybody's own prejudice. And I think the best way to meet that is to know that we all have prejudice. So when I say think of a woman or think of a German scientist, you're going to think of something and you're not going to necessarily think of me. But so I think even if you're part of a minority group yourself, or if you're a woman, or if you have been discriminated against, you still also have the ability to meet others with prejudice. So every person needs to be aware of that and just remind ourselves that every other person that we meet is an individual, and we want to meet them as a human being and not as the image we have in our mind. Because if we just meet the image we have in our mind again and again, we are going to miss out on all they have to contribute and all the connection we can have with them. And I think another challenge that might prevent equity are structural challenges, conditions that make life harder. And I think the best way to meet them is to see everybody's needs as a shared challenge to meet. It's not about women, it's not about people being disabled or any other specific groups you can point out. It's about thinking, who do we have in our lab? And we want these people, we want everybody, because we want to be diverse, we want to have different perspectives and different skills. And so how do we make it possible that the pregnant scientist is able to stay in our lab, that she might not be able to work in the lab for 9 months, but that she can still work, and that others might work with the toxic chemicals for a while, or any other needs. And I think it's important to think that it's men as well that have needs. And if we create an environment where everybody's needs are met as a shared challenge, everybody benefits. And it's not like, oh, we're making extra effort just because we want to have women in the lab. And I think the third point, what prevents or what makes it hard to create an inclusive environment, is that it's always hard to be the first person. So I remember I once happened to be on a ship, like on a small research expedition with about 6 others. And the group just happened to be everybody men except me. And all these men were excellent scientists and they were kind people. But still, whenever the whole group was speaking, I, for the first time in my life, realized my voice is actually quite high-pitched. Just because when everybody else was speaking, I sounded different. And I think you can think of it the same way. If you go into a group of native speakers of English and you're an international person, you suddenly hear your own accent and you think, oh, I sound different. And I think it's important when you're feeling different, you're always standing out. You always feel a bit nervous because you're doing something new. And I think it's important to make people feel welcome, especially when they are brave enough to be the first. So whether it be the first woman in your lab or the first international scientist in your lab or anything else, be aware of it and tell them that you appreciate that they are there, and make them feel especially welcome and say, we need people like you. We want our lab to contain women, to contain whatever other group your lab doesn't contain yet, and tell them you are welcome and I'm so glad that you are here and I want you to know.
Clarissa, I so love that response, and I'm looking out at this audience and I'm thinking there's probably stories about the first person to do something in these sciences among all of you out there. And so just love the fact that you called that out. And I see you out there as people that have done things that at times have been challenging. I want to turn to Sam, and I'm going to just quick mention that Sam has another obligation to get to. So you will see her bolt out of here, and she's going to look like, I don't know, she's going to look like she's on a mission, but she's really just going off to do more good work. So before you do that, Sam, we have you here. And with your leadership in FEMA and your experience in climate policy, I'd love to have you address the following. How has the push for greater access and opportunities for women in your field led to increased resilience and adaptation, ultimately supporting climate action?
Thank you very much, and what a privilege to be a part of this panel. And again, apologies for needing to dash just a little bit early. And thank you so much for that question. As a senior executive in U.S. government, I have the great privilege of watching over the years the evolution of the U.S. federal workforce and a greater integration of the views and the professionalism that women bring within emergency management, within various threats and hazards. I happen to be a floodplain manager and a hydrologist. We have seen over the 30 years of my work a great evolution in the way that we look at natural hazards, the ways that we recognize that disasters are really natural processes, and it's only a disaster when we as humans intentionally put things in harm's way that we care about. And so part of the idea is to integrate greater perspectives of women and girls, of traditional ecological knowledge and wisdom and intelligence, and bring that into the emergency management field, which is ripe for evolution and revolution. Within, for example, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA, in the United States, we have, for the first time in the 50-year history of my organization, the first woman leader, with Administrator Deanne Criswell, appointed by the President. We also, in a 5-year period within the FEMA workforce, increased the representation of women by more than 6,500 people. And so being able to get a better balance also among our leadership ranks and having more women leaders has brought forward a greater, more inclusive ethos into the emergency management field. We all know why that's urgent, right? Women and girls are disproportionately affected by disasters around the world, and yet they have insight that is often not included in the design of disaster risk reduction, resilience, adaptation, and preparedness strategies. And yet women, through research with the United Nations, through research in my organization, have been found to have greater awareness of natural threats and anthropogenic threats and hazards. They have a deeper understanding of the needs of households and communities, largely because of traditional roles that they may be playing. And yet, when it comes time to design a response strategy, they are too often underrepresented. So in my organization, we've gone after a more co-powered model, a more inclusive model with real intentionality. This means, as for example, if we're going to work with a community on a pre-disaster hazard mitigation project, we're encouraging and we are looking for and we are measuring in ways that can be quantified the ways that they are building those indicators of resilience, not just for the traditional outcomes of risk reduction, but toward a deeper understanding of resilience and adaptation that reaches everyone in the community. And we can go through some specific examples of that and some of the things that I'm really excited about, but I just wanted to really call out some of those examples.
Okay, I'm taking the bait. Can you give us a specific example?
I can. So, although I come from FEMA in Washington, D.C., the vast majority of our work is done through our regions. So we have 10 regional offices across the United States and the territories. Within Region 9, that is based in Oakland, California, we have the first ever all-female-led incident management assistance team. These are teams that are deployed. These are kinetic, rapid deploy teams to help respond to disasters or other significant incidents. They are the U.S. federal government's first line in the run-up to a disaster or in the initial hours and days following a disaster. This Region 9 all-female-led incident management assistant team has deployed across the United States and around the world in the U.S. territories, in American Samoa, in the Northern Mariana Islands, for example, and being able to bring that intelligence, that wisdom and insight that women can bring to disaster response, to those really critical humanitarian early hours of a disaster, and in those first days and weeks of a disaster, is helping to inform a more inclusive approach, a more complete and comprehensive approach, and a more robust pivot toward early recovery, which is absolutely critical. So I'm pretty excited about that.
I love that. It's such an inspiring example. So I'm going to turn to Coral. Coral, you're a leader in climate action and sustainability in the Pacific region, and you bring a particularly important perspective to this conversation. So, given the unique challenges faced by Pacific Island nations, how are women in these communities leading efforts in ocean conservation and climate resilience? And can you share some successful initiatives or projects?
Well, thank you very much for the question and for the invitation to be a part of this very esteemed panel. It's a real privilege. So I just want to give a little bit of a context to where I come from, because lots of people often don't know. We're very small and in a very big wide ocean space. So I come from the blue Pacific continent, and that is the largest healthy lung left on the planet. It is the blue food bowl of the world. It supplies over 60% of the world's tuna stocks. It has some of the world's most diverse and incredible marine ecosystems and biodiversity, a lot of which is not documented in modern science. But I also come from the people that were the astronauts of the ocean, right? For thousands of years, we sailed out across this huge blue unknown when everyone thought the world was flat. And through that accumulated knowledge, which for me was systematic observations, we didn't have scrolls, right? Our cultures didn't write things. We have an oral history. So our traditional knowledge and that systematic observation has been handed down from mouth to ear in performances and songs, etc. And so when we speak about traditional knowledge and cultural intelligence, that is science. It's just verified in a different way. And it's really important to acknowledge that, because it means that you don't have to have a title from a university or a formal system of education to claim that you're a scientist. So 50% of our population in the Pacific essentially is a scientist if they've been taught and passed down that knowledge, which is why it's so important to keep that evidence passed on. I have the privilege of being both. I was born in the ocean, raised in the ocean, but I had the privilege of studying at university and as well. But when I go out into the ocean and make a decision on what I teach my children to catch or spear, it's not informed by my science education, because we don't have anywhere near the data and science to inform that decision. I have what I was taught from my father, my mother, my brothers, and the community. And so for me, that just really highlights the importance of understanding and contextualizing when people talk about traditional knowledge and practice. It is a science. It's just verified in a different way. And what we have in a scenario in the Pacific, which I experienced throughout my career, is, people come in, they record my stories, our elders' stories, they get a high qualification, and then they come back and tell us what we have to do. And then I can't speak about my experience because I have to quote someone who has published what they came and interviewed me about. So there is a significant imbalance and, unfortunately, disregard for the value of that information and knowledge, which I think we really need to reset. And for Pacific women, it really underpins the significant value that they bring to a huge array of different functions and roles in the ocean space and in the resilient space. So we have everything now from women in ocean science and formal modern science, also providing their traditional experience to complement that knowledge set. So we have two sets of knowledge that help us make better decisions. We also have women on the front line of fish rider agreements, which is essentially when we have a lot of illegal, unreported and unregulated fishing in the region. And so we are allowed to put ship riders on there from the Pacific. And many of them die, right? They are thrown overboard because for a ship that's making a lot of money, if they report against their activities, it's just not safe. And women are starting to go into that space and they face significant challenges. So as a regional institution, we wrap around that, wrap around them and try and provide as much support as we possibly can. There are many, many other areas in which women are progressing in the Pacific to push boundaries that are globally leading, which I'm really proud of. The maritime boundary delimitation work is a really critical one. As you know, climate change is impacting on the certainty of our jurisdiction in the blue space because of international law, etc., and the impacts of climate change. And we've got women on the front line leading and helping countries fix their boundaries, argue in international law how to protect those, which is another critical area. I might switch now very quickly to a more personal experience. I'm from Niue, which is probably the smallest country in the world, to be honest. But our country has committed 40% of our blue real estate to a no-take zone. It's the largest percentage contribution of a blue real estate of any country in the world. And when you look at the value of that asset, it is much more than carbon. It's much more than just biodiversity. It's much more than fish, whales, whatever your interest is. And everyone splices off those things, like carbon is the most important thing, or this. And in totality, it's actually an incredible natural asset that, if we truly valued, means that we come to the table with a global environmental contribution that is incredible. And yet we're on the front line of the impacts of climate change and we can't access the funds to keep our communities safe. So what Niue has done to maintain that asset is to monetize the effort that it takes to protect that and the resources needed to leverage a sustainable, resilient blue economy that will protect that ocean asset forever, naturally. So we're not monetizing the ecosystem services. I think it's really important to make that distinction. It is not a right to pollute if you support this initiative. It is a recognition that the value that you accrue by sponsoring 1 square kilometre of ocean in that space has so much more dividends than you will ever get from a financial system. It's one that we can't measure, but it doesn't mean it doesn't have value, and we shouldn't let that dictate the true appreciated value of those types of assets. And those resources that are leveraged from that approach go into a trust, an endowment, that then provides a assured, predictable level of funding to support Niue's community and ocean conservation and resilience in perpetuity. And that means that we get to raise the next generation of ocean leaders. And some of the initiatives that we're funding are around, Daughters of the Deep, ensuring that our girls are able to go in, get PADI certified, learn how to grow coral, create sustainable businesses, etc. And that kind of financing mechanism that is assured in perpetuity is delivered at a rate that is commensurate with the absorptive capacity of our communities. We cannot access these huge global funds which force us to spend a lot of money in a very short period of time. And that's a game-changing approach to really enabling communities across the region and girls and women that ability to continue to exist and exist in a really positive way, and to be proud of that. So my colleague from the Niue Ocean-wide Trust will share a few leaflets that can give you more information about that. But I just wanted to finish by saying, we developed this from the ground up, and I have been the architect of this based on 30 years of frustration in trying to access funds in a way that communities can actually deliver. But this year we were given a global award on world-changing ideas with this ocean conservation commitment, which we hope that other countries will take up so that they don't see conservation as a loss, but a contribution, and that they are fairly resourced to do that together in partnership with others. And we also had this year a Disney with National Geographic Pristine Seas, a documentary that's on Disney Plus and Hulu called Protecting Paradise, and that tells the whole story about this journey, which is flipping the coin on us seen as begging for these climate funds to, hang on a second, we bring the world's largest natural capital in a healthy state to the world. That's our contribution. We're not asking for wealth and everything, we're just asking for enough to ensure that our countries and communities can continue to exist and can have livelihoods that are built around the traditional respect for their natural assets and cultures in the ocean space. Thank you.
Carl, thank you for both answering the question and bringing it to our sort of full attention with that very warm response that you got to it about here we are at the finance COP, which can seem so mired down, and then you realize that there is this innovation happening that is very profound in terms of how it connects the past and the future. Thank you. Elizabeth.
Hello.
You're a PhD candidate. We know what that means, like you've jumped through a lot of hoops at Scripps, and you represent the next generation of scientists shaping the future of ocean research. So, how did this all begin? What inspired you to pursue a career in ocean science, and what specific areas of research are you currently focused on, and how do you see your work connected to climate action?
Thank you for the question, and thank you so much for including me on this panel. I want to start by saying I study Antarctic bacteria, which may seem very separate from the rest of the panel, but in fact, I study the carbon cycle in an area that's undergoing rapid change, and it was initially discovered by Polynesians. So I'm weirdly very connected to the rest of the panel. When I was young, I don't remember this, but when I was young, my parents told me that when I asked what I wanted to be when I grew up, I said I wanted to turn into a dolphin. And then they had to inform me that that's not possible. So I feel like I've just been in my career trying to get as close as possible to that. And I would say the question was, what are my thoughts on supporting the youth to increase scientific women in science? And I have to say, I would not be here without economic support, especially. I mean, you spoke on that as well. Both public and private funds have supported my journey in science, the National Science Foundation being the primary source for my PhD. But there's also a lot of private economic support as well for my undergrad education. And additional to the economic support, I think the increase of legal support for women in the career I have. I do Antarctic research, so I'm in the field for 7 months at a time. And in the time that I've had my PhD, there's been a really big seed change in the National Science Foundation for supporting women that have experienced sexual violence in the field. And I think that's been a really wonderful movement, and I'm really proud to be a part of the women that have pushed for that change.
Absolutely. And we are all grateful for you and your colleagues that have pushed for that change. So, how can academic institutions and the scientific community do better to support and encourage the next generation? One of this is making sexual assault and, absolutely scientific misconduct, which AGU has strongly supported as well. But any other ideas about that?
Yeah, I think women are not a monolith, and I think that our policies should reflect that. I think we should be thinking about how to increase intersectionality, especially in earth sciences. I posed this question to my friends as well. I was like, I'm going to be on this panel. What do you think? And they all were like, we need to pay graduate students a fair wage, and we need to make sure that we're supporting them in all areas of their life. You mentioned pregnancy. That's a great place. We need to be increasing protections and just visibility for those women as well.
Thank you. Thank you. So let's open the floor to some broader discussion with a few additional questions. We'll do a quick round robin and then open it up to this really wonderful full house that I see here. So here's the question. Looking ahead, what are the most critical actions needed to ensure a sustainable future for our oceans, and how can female scientists contribute to these efforts? On some level, you've all touched on this briefly, but this is a chance so I'm going to go around. I'm going to start with you, Clarissa. Okay, looking ahead, what are the critical actions that we can ensure the sustainability of the ocean and that female scientists play a role here?
So I think to protect the ocean, we need to understand it. So being scientists and studying it and understanding it on different levels is one of our key contributions. And another thing is to actually act on what scientists advise. And I think this is why a lot of us are here, why we are also doing the Ocean Pavilion, to say we are here, we are part of this planet. Most of this planet is actually covered with water. And we want discussions around how to protect our planet, to involve the ocean, and to be aware of it as one of the largest ecosystems on this planet.
I love it.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And I think to build on aspects of that, advancing an interdisciplinary approach and taking that broad view of what we view as science, right? The traditional ecological knowledge is extraordinarily insightful and valuable and essential to having an understanding that leads to informed decision, that leads to the design and the citing of solutions to climate change that will be durable, that will be legally defensible, that will be socially embraced. And if we make the mistake, or if I may, if we repeat some of the mistakes that have been made in the past to things like tropical cyclones or coastal erosion or even estuarine or riverine challenges or issues with flooding or drought, both ends of the hydrograph, through purely engineered gray infrastructural approaches, we are not only setting ourselves up for even more catastrophic impacts down the road when these brittle systems fail, as they inevitably will, but we pay a tremendous price along the line in ecological damage and in the continued alienation of some of our most important and valuable partners, whether it be women and girls, indigenous perspectives, low to moderate income folks, subsistence fishers, and others. So it's been an extraordinary journey to see the Federal Emergency Management Agency and the U.S. government more broadly take a more inclusive approach, but we are at only the beginning of that journey, I think. We are still viewing extreme weather as a threat. We still view flooding as something we must prevent. We view wildfire as something we must suppress, instead of really embracing and recognizing that these are natural processes that we must accommodate. And I believe that by including more perspectives, we arrive at better designs. One very, very quick example, as we have sought to respond and recover from recent disasters, one of the things that we've really worked to equip our local leaders with is the capacity, the skills, the technical assistance, the financial assistance to take that more inclusive approach. And this has resulted in designs on the ground that integrate the arts more effectively, that create safer spaces more responsively, and that better reflect the views of women and also young people. When we hand children the pen to design what the future of their community looks like, we can get extraordinary results. So when I mention multidisciplinary, I mean multi-sectoral, I mean multi-perspective as well as discipline.
The big multidisciplinary. Coral, your thoughts?
Thank you. I'll leverage straight off that last point of multi-dimensional elements of the ocean. So I think the first thing we need to do is get a work program on oceans in the UNFCCC process. It's only been 30 years. This is the big buffer of planetary stability in climate, and it performs that climate balance. And yet we come in, and humans have done this, right? It's not the ecosystem is all connected. We've spliced off. You can't talk about black carbon, that's in the IMO. You can't talk about the impacts on migratory stocks, that's in the UN Fish Stocks Agreement. You can't talk about the EEZ changes and boundary delimitations, that's in UNCLOS. Or the disappearance of your country, that's kind of a climate security issue, but they're in denial as well. So we splice off the way that we legally protect and manage this incredible resource that doesn't have those boundaries. And so, of course, we're not going to come up with multilateral systems that actually address the problem. And so we need everyone to get the shoulder to the wheel and call on the international community to bring this conversation on oceans in a meaningful way and make decisions. Even if we're requesting other people and other mechanisms to do stuff, we need to say that. Because the urgency of inaction and impunity is visible here. And I think my only other point is to re-stress, Moana is a scientist. She just didn't go to a formal Western system of education. And I'd really like to see more Pacific women with this traditional knowledge and experience, which is incredibly rich, partner with women who have Western systems of education, so that when they're on a panel, they talk about the same sets of knowledge from different perspectives, informing a good decision that they're going to implement together. Because people don't get it. People don't understand, which is why I always use examples, right? And I'll use my mum. She left school at 14. She's very shy to go into a fora because she's like, I can't say anything in the fishing discussions, it's not... I don't have an education. She's gut and cleaned more fish species than any scientist has ever dissected of fish in a biology lab, or for that matter, all the fishermen in Niue who've caught fish. She knows more about what fish eat at different types of seasons, what their traditional names are and their English names. But she doesn't recognize that value, and others don't either. And so we need to empower these people because there's a finite time in which they're around, and we're losing that traditional knowledge faster than we can keep up. We don't have the money to actually bring all those people together, empower them, and document that in a respectful way that gives them the credence that they deserve, but protects that knowledge for the next generation. We need the resources to do that, and those are sensitive conversations that are not easy to do. And so I hope that we can really start to appreciate that traditional knowledge is not anecdotal. It is real. It is just verified in a different way. And in fact, we've got so much scientific and digitization ways that we can capture that now in respectful ways. But we actually have to consciously recognize that value. It's not just about arts and anything, which is very beautiful, but it is actually a solid part of what needs to be part of the decision-making process. Thank you.
Okay, Elizabeth.
I would like to just add, when I first went to Antarctica, my first year, I read every book I could conceivably find about Antarctica, and the common narrative thread I found in all literature that I read was that it was a man's world. Like, this is how we explore. It's the solo man with a beard and the big puffy jacket going out into the environment. And it was really disheartening as a female scientist headed into that environment. And since then, I've actually discovered that there is a wealth of women that have been on the continent, and we just have not told their stories. And so I think, to add to these wonderful suggestions that the rest of the panel gave, the history exists, and we need to be telling it. Like, the Ron Ice Shelf is named after the male scientist that discovered it, but Jackie Ron was right next to him, and his book is based on her journal from their expedition. So where's the book about her? Like, I'll write it, but it should be written. And there's plenty of other examples like that as well.
Wow, thank you. Now, I, of course, have lots of questions I could keep asking, but I really want to take advantage of all the people that are in the room here. Are you going to help me do this? Oh, great. Questions?
Really loves the Kingdom of Tonga. I just want to acknowledge what you're spearing here. As you know, the Kingdom of Tonga is based on matriarchal energies. We did have a lot of female kings. So our ancestors based their energies on the rightfulness and the divine energies equally equated, how we can look after and giving hope to our children, but looking after nature. So I feel very privileged here, Coral, to hear your voice. So my journey has been started. I'm still a climate change activist since COP21 in Paris. So for me personally, the reason why I'm standing up, because the needed is not only for the leading scientists, the innovation for the Oceania science, but this is the leading way to bring all us together. I spoke on a higher ministerial meeting with Princess of Jordan in Egypt, and I state clearly how important the role of a woman. And for us to have hope for humanity, we need to acknowledge the Mother Earth desperately needed all of us. And one of the things that I want to add on to this, the importance of the voices of the female voters around the world, especially the youth. That's what I'm always acknowledging and pushing. They are the one who change all of the systems that we are facing. What I'm bringing in here is very simple. You need to bring women as the new wine in a new bottle, not to bring in women energies and new wine in an old bottle. So that's what I can say, acknowledging. Please go ahead. But the important all of this, as I spoke to Greta when she was in Madrid, the importance of the role of a woman, how important it is. And we need to stand united. And for that matter, I'm invited you to come to Tonga August the 25th, August the 26th next year. I'm running the first whale scientific conference of the pathway from the Antarctica to Tonga. And that's why I'm here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The scientist women, appreciate your presentation and your experience. I'm a scientist. I came from Abu Dhabi, UAE. I run my own company, which started in June 2024. And this was a passion for science. I'm a molecular geneticist myself. I've done my studies in UK. And I can relate to your experiences of meeting some discomfort. But what makes you difficult is what makes you stronger. So I'm really proud of how you presented, but We are working with biodiversity in UAE currently, and most of your advices is very great. I mean, how things are working, but we do have coral reef restoration going on. But my company does the molecular genetics level. So the eDNA, we do sequencing, which is a high throughput technology. And those are the kind of services we provide. But hearing a different beautiful stories, that made me really remember of some of the pains I went through. But thank you very much. And it's been a pleasure to attend this session.
I'm just going to come down here and thank you, and thank you particularly. I think there's many ways that we've got people that work in different sectors here, government, civil society, academia, and the private sector work that you're doing, of course, is a really great partner. Other questions?
Hello everyone, my name is Pai. I'm Thai Youth Delegate. I'm studying environmental science right now in 3rd years. I want to tell you guys that in Southeast Asians to study science as a Asian parents family is not that easy, because when you say that you want to study science, it's quite hard, and I know that it's a hard path, and yeah, it's a hard path, but thanks you guys to be here, and yeah. Running organizations and do many things is not that easy. So thanks everyone to run and scientists' role in women. I really appreciate these sections. Thank you.
I'm going to go back to you, which is, if there was one thing you could change, what would it be?
I think in Thailand, the one thing that's very hard is to fight with adults. Adult in Thailand is really like old schools. They have many things to change. Like nowadays, currently there are ministers in Thai pavilions. And yeah, everyone have to deserve him. Everyone have to like, oh, please come here, please come here. And yeah, they care about themselves. They care about what's the minister going to do more than what is going on in climate emergency. So that I also working in local governments, and I see a lot of people suffering in many like government policy. But the government say that that people is overthinking or some kind like that. But it's not a real thing. It's not a real thing. It's overthinking. It's not gonna happen. But when it happens, no one have a responsibilities to their voice. So that I want to change that. I want to have youth in the policy. Like I'm a policy making, and I think it's very hard that one youth can be like the part of governments to create the policies. And where it's very important because the youth is the one who have to live here like longer than every adult, and the world is belong to youth right now, and the youth have to be part of any like governments or any policy that relate to youth, and every policy that occurs and that like occur to youth too, and every effect of emergencies like climate emergency affect to the youth too. That's what that's the thing I want to change, like have the youth more than right now in all the pavilions and all the governments. Thank you.
I want to thank you and the other youth delegates for taking time and being here in this space where sometimes you really have to fight to have your voice heard, and I appreciate how brave you are. I also love how this picked up on a number of comments on the panel about how when it's not just women, but women and girls bringing in perspectives that are really important for policy making. I believe we have time for one more question from the audience. Oh, please.
Hi, I'm Lisa Levin from Scripps Institution of Oceanography. I don't know if you have the answer to this question, but you know, the Western societies are more or less patriarchal, and we're learning that many of the Pacific Island nations have matriarchal societies. So I'm wondering, have you found that leads to a different pathway for knowledge and indigenous science to come forward? Is there something that we can be learning from the matriarchal societies that would reflect and we could adopt?
Thanks. That's a really interesting question. So I wouldn't say the vast majority of Pacific countries is patriarchal, but there are some very strong, when there are matriarchal systems, they are extremely strong. And so we definitely can learn from them. What I would say is like our region is very young in democratic Western systems of governance, right? Our oldest country, but in that terms, is 61 years old, and that's Samoa. Our youngest is probably Palau, and that is about 21 years old in democratic Western systems of governance. This sits atop thousands of years of traditional knowledge systems, which are still incredibly strong. Right, so we still have traditional systems of chieflydom that have their own governance structures, influence and support decision making. So the Western systems of governance are still extremely patriarchal, right? If you look at the statistics, the majority of representation of women in parliament is still extremely low, except my country, thank goodness. But we're pretty small, so it's not hard to find that balance, and we're quite vocal, if you haven't guessed that already. But even where there are statistics in matriarchal countries, I won't say which ones those are, but where we have these matriarchal countries, there is a low representation sometimes of women in parliament. But if you look at the traditional system of governance, the chiefs that meet in the traditional houses, who are the string pullers of some of the puppets in parliament, it is the women that are telling the men what to do. And I think, and they do that for lots of different ways, but it is a deep cultural respect that it would be a very brave man to go against the decision of the traditional women leaders who've advised them clearly on a decision that they need to make. But we often, when we judge that country from a typical gender equity or equality perspective, they rate really lowly, you know, and so it doesn't actually reflect the power of women in decision making, which we should be recognizing, valuing, and lifting above for others to learn from. And again, it comes back to what we understand is traditional knowledge, traditional systems of governance, culture, and decision making. And I feel very blessed because I thought the whole world was, I was born and raised in the Pacific. I've lived my whole life there. I just thought everyone else was the same. It wasn't until I went out to study at universities I realized, oh my God, okay, you know, that you don't just have indigenous people running countries, because all of our Pacific countries are run by indigenous people. So it isn't a marginalized group. It's a powerful part of the leadership of the Blue Pacific continent. And so it's always hard for me to grapple with that in the way that manifests in other places. So I think we do have some great examples. We've got some not great examples as well, to be fair. But I think, for me, it just highlights that we need the best of both worlds. So we've got this incredible, rich wealth of science and learnings from Western society. We have these incredibly rich traditional knowledge and systems of governance. And if we just sat together and really appreciated the best of both worlds, we'd be so much better off as a society. And so I hope that we can get to that. And maybe this is a good example of an area that we can sort of start.
Pearl, thank you so much for that. So we just have a few minutes left. And I'm going to do one of those lightning rounds. Okay, and you're going to... Goodbye, we will miss you. We are so happy that you are with us. Okay. Okay, the rest of you, don't go away yet. This isn't the end. She's just making... do you have one more question? Okay, let's do one more question versus my question. It's going to have to be... Oh, goodbye. But there's a person behind you.
Keep on coming. Okay, thank you very much. My name is Castor from Tanzania. I've been working with female volunteers in marine conservation, and I can stand with you, esteemed panelists, that we need to include more women in our ocean science. But I think we needed to see this issue in different perspective, since in many developing countries, including my countries, we are still struggling to ensure that not only women are just have an opportunity to go to science subject, but they have an opportunity to quality education. So it's very difficult to find a woman in our country pursuing maybe ocean science subjects and whatever the case, since we all know that it's very difficult to protect something which we do not understand. And then for us in Tanzania, we still have a lot of beliefs like ocean can just take care of by itself, and then it not need any science to take care of the ocean. So my point of view is that we need to start from the grassroots. We need to build a proper system of incubating young people in ocean science since they are young. Since we cannot just start from nowhere, we need to start at the grassroots to make sure that we empower those young people, and then we open more opportunities even for scholarships so that we can ensure we have more young people in this ocean science concept. Thank you.
And thank you. And I don't think I could have come up with a better sort of concluding statement. And thank you so much. The ocean won't take care of itself. We are the people that are taking care of the ocean, and it is the young people that we are particularly concerned about because it is their future, and we are depending greatly on them. So with that, can we give a round of thanks to this amazing panel? And of course, come back to the Ocean Pavilion for more great programming. Thank you so much.